Thank you all for coming to our webinar today. 6 sales metrics you should be tracking but probably aren't. We're thrilled you are able to make time to join us today. I know you're all looking forward to some awesome content and learnings from 2 fantastic sales leaders at ProsperWorks and Grow. So one thing before we get started and I introduce you guys to your hosts, I just want to mention that we will be having a Q&A at the end of the webinar. So if you have questions during, please stay muted and just type in your question in the question box and we'll get to those at the end. We'll probably try to save 5 to 10 minutes to answer all the questions you have. So thanks again for joining, and it's going to be an awesome webinar. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Kyle Bastien and Jake Young. So Jake has been the sales leader at grow.com for the last few years. He's been building and running and managing sales teams at organizations for the last 8 years, and he's actually grown the sales team at Grow from 2 to 45 people over the last 2 years, which is very impressive. A lot of great growth there. So he's really passionate about helping others succeed in their career. And a little fun fact, he's 6'8", so he's officially dubbed himself, or unofficially dubbed himself as the mascot of grow.com. And then we've got Kyle Bastien with ProsperWorks here as well. So Kyle's currently the director of sales training at ProsperWorks, and he's been in the sales game for over 10 years, either leading sales teams or running operations at different SaaS companies in Silicon Valley, like Demandforce, Intuit, and Humanity. And a little fun fact about Kyle is that his wife owns a business, so he constantly sells all of the software that he is working for and sells to customers to his wife, which is awesome. So I'll hand it over to these 2 amazing sales leaders, and they're going to walk you through their learnings that they've had throughout their career.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Kira. And thank you, everybody, for joining. We're really happy to do this. This is something that Jake and I both really geek out on. And Jake, it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm excited to work with you on this.
Me too. Me too.
All right. So, guys, quickly, I'm going to tell you a little bit about ProsperWorks, and then we'll get into the good stuff here. So ProsperWorks is the CRM that teams love to use. You know, the perspective that we take on CRM, but really I think any software that you might be considering for your enterprise is focusing on end user adoption and basically answering the question of, will the people who use this day to day actually want to use this, and will they be excited and engaged in using this? And so we've designed a CRM that lives up to that standard. We do that by partnering with Google and the G Suite and focusing on beautiful design, integration, and automation anywhere we can. So that's a little bit about ProsperWorks. Jake, you want to tell us a little bit about Grow?
Yeah, for sure. So we get customers all the time that come to us that are using ProsperWorks as their CRM, and they just can't speak highly enough about it. So we love when we have mutual customers. But Grow is an analytics platform. We're focused on bringing enterprise quality reporting and dashboarding companies that aren't quite big enough to have a full analytics team. It's interesting that most companies, doesn't really matter the size, are using about 17 different software applications to run their business. And we focus on helping you to aggregate all of that data in one place so that you can have kind of a command center to get the team rowing in the same direction, working on the same thing. And I'm personally, along with Kyle, excited to share some metrics that have been hugely important to us. We're not going to really focus on some of the more important SaaS metrics today, like payback period or CAC to LTV. Maybe Kyle and I will talk about those later if there's demand from the group, but we want to focus on questions that we've had as sales leaders over the years and how to solve those problems through trackable data. Examples, where are my failure points at in sales? How can I grow my sales teams? What behaviors are really important to growing that sales team? You know, I think we've all been in a situation that we've had great quarters, we've had great months, and we just go and grow the sales team, and we're really not sure why. And so some of these metrics are going to go from basic to complex, but as we talk about these indicators, they're ones that you can make decisions on in the moment, or some of them are a little bit more lagging, and they're the results of the efforts. We call these KPIs, and Kyle's going to start us off with a great baseline for the sales team here.
Yeah, absolutely, Jake. So, you know, I think when you're looking at any of these metrics or data in general, hopefully what they're doing is informing like what you should do and where, you and your most valuable resource is obviously your time as a sales leader, manager, or leader in an organization. And so how you spend that time should hopefully be on the things that are going to give you the most lift or the most leverage in the organization. So we're going to get into some very interesting ways of looking at the business to point you in the right direction and inform what you guys should be doing. But the first thing you need to do is get your arms around the current state of your baseline KPIs. Like basically, if you don't know where you stand right in this moment, then you're not going to be able to chart a credible course to improve the business or drive any kind of meaningful results. So we call this the revenue equation, and it can be represented in terms of a funnel, but it's basically looking at how many leads came into my business over the period that I'm looking at, usually monthly or quarterly. How many of those became qualified sales opportunities? From that, what did we win? And what was our average deal size? And if you multiply those things together, then you're going to end up with what your revenue was that month. Now, most organizations know what their revenue was for the month or the quarter. They can get that out of their accounting software or however they're tracking their cash flow and finances. But breaking this down into conversion points will give you your first set of KPIs of understanding why your revenue is your revenue. Is it because you guys are getting a ton of leads in the top of the funnel and then going through kind of medium or industry average conversion rates? Are you guys really effective at closing a lot of small deals to hit the number? Or are you, big game hunting and closing larger deals to hit that number? So this will help you understand kind of the shape of the business in a little more detail and hopefully give you a jumping off point where you can now use some of the things we're going to talk about to optimize for things like conversion rate or deal size or generating more ops and so forth. Jake, how do you guys typically use this in the context of your business?
So one thing that we use here that's actually really hard for us to nail down is what activities are influencing what those conversion points that you just talked about. We really try to not get bogged down in too many activity points, but we try to identify one or two items that we know influence each stage of the funnel, and we have those measured. Reps are not really like compensated or judged off of those activities, but we just know where to look if one part of the funnel is failing. So I guess the point I'm trying to make there is like one part of the funnel is failing, then you have numbers to back it up. And that's really how we use it. And I'm not like hardcore about activity metrics. I think that it might drive inverse behavior of what you really want. We want our reps focusing on selling, and we want our reps focusing on doing what's best for the customer, not just making a certain amount of calls to them. And I know there's two different thoughts around activity metrics. Do you guys put a lot of weight on those?
Yeah, we do focus on activity metrics for sure. I think what we found is that there's like a baseline level of activity that's required to hit the numbers, and that's something that you can certainly back into by looking at like how many, especially on the leads to ops metric. I think that's where activity metric or activity tracking is most relevant. But I also agree with what you're saying, Jake. Some of the most successful salespeople that I've known in my career weren't necessarily the highest activity people. They were the folks with the experience and kind of like knew how to get the most leverage out of the activities they were participating in. And I think you bring up a really good point, which is like, if I can do some analysis and say, it takes on average 5 calls to a lead to create an op. That doesn't mean if I go out to the floor and say, call every lead 5 times, they're going to create more ops. It's more about like the quality and the intention, and not really wasting the activity that you're engaging in, that is probably more impactful than just driving for raw activity numbers. And that's the way we look at it. Do you guys see it the same way?
Yeah, same way. And honestly, the next one that we're going to look at, the lead velocity rate's very, very similar in the fact that your MRR, your revenue, your sales, that's kind of the standard measure, like you said, of what your sales team's doing. How did I do last month or last quarter is typically the question that we want to ask, but lead velocity rate allows us to see what rate are your qualified leads growing month over month. And that tells us more of what we're trying to accomplish than just what we did at the present state. I think the way that we look at that is if your leads are growing faster than your revenue, that is where you can actually start to predict future growth. If our CEO listened to this, he'd laugh at me because I always quote Jason Lemkin, but he says that if you want to grow your sales by 100%, you need to grow your leads by 120%. And being able to quantifiably track that velocity of qualified leads is going to be the best possible indicator of where you're going to be at in the future. So I ask myself, like, why 120%? And it seems that most companies, as they cast their net just a little bit wider, they lose a little bit of quality and a little bit of efficiency. So growing the top of the funnel by a little bit more than you would normally grow your sales is always the safest bet. And calculating it's been interesting for us as well. One of the first, I think, a first mistake that a lot of companies make, and maybe you guys have nailed this, Kyle, but multiple times we've missed on just defining what an MQL is. What is a marketing qualified lead? You really have to have that defined before you can track this. For us, we settled on a set of firmographic, demographic, and marketing interactions that fit for us and our target. And sometimes I've seen we're afraid to throw away a lead or not hand it to sales to get them to work on it because it is a lead and we paid for that. But defining what a marketing qualified lead is and growing that is the way that I think is going to give you the best indication of future growth. So just to kind of walk through the formula there, let's say you had 90 leads last month and you had 100 qualified leads this month. So the difference there is 10 divided by where you're at before, and it looks like you're growing at about 12 or 13%. I'm trying to do that math in my head. I probably should have had it figured out beforehand. But we just back into this number. We were saying, hey, what are the MQLs that I need to give to a rep? Because that's my job as a sales leader, and working with marketing is making sure that they're in as big of a place to be successful as that they can. And so we found out that we need to give them 52 marketing qualified leads per month to hit their 50K quota. And then we look at how many sales reps we're planning to hire, and we say that's the quantity that we need to grow by. Obviously, if it's a quantity number, the percentage isn't going to be the best number for us, but we know exactly where our percentage needs to hit. And we've learned so much looking at this. If your leads aren't growing ahead of where your plan is, I'm sure that a lot of you listening are in that same boat. Like, hey, I just haven't been able to grow my leads. Then you better have like a pretty good process for increasing deal size or efficiency. But I've seen that increasing those efficiencies is what I like to call like a 20% sum game. What I mean by that is if your team's going to be 5% more productive with their time, that usually only translates into 1% more results. Because Kyle, you just walked us through that funnel. There's different stages, and those efficiencies have to make it through all the stages to end up into the results that you want. So in my opinion, the efficiencies in the deal size, although important and something that you should focus on, if you don't have the lead velocity rate growing month over month, you're not going to be able to grow your sales team and hit those targets that you want to have. Have you guys seen similar results there?
Yeah, Jake, you're talking about two really important things. I'm glad you brought it up, because one of the biggest reasons that sales teams miss their goals, like across all industries and all size teams, is headcount, is failure to plan ahead and get in front of your hiring headcount, right? And so if your team has a bunch of individual quotas and the roll up of those quotas is less than what your plan called for in that month of that quarter, then you're set up to fail before you make a single call or have a single sales meeting that month. So you're absolutely right. And so how do I know I can hire more people? Well, the leads absolutely need to be there because salespeople got to eat. You got to have something for them to do, to make sure you're not, wasting your, your investment in your workforce by, having them be, under capacity. So that's a very important thing you talk about there, right?
Yeah.
Another interesting
leads are never good enough, though, right? That's always how we feel in sales. Never good enough.
I have dreams at times of the reps that stop asking me about the leads and where they came from and why I'm good, right? So no, never good enough. That's fine, and accept that too. Go in knowing that. But you do raise a good point too about the sources of your MQLs, and like a lot of people struggle. You're absolutely right with like what is an MQL. And for if you're not familiar with the term, you're talking about like what level of engagement with marketing does marketing then say, yeah, this is probably worth sending over to sales. I've done a lot of approaches on looking at this. Kira knows a ton about this as well. And one trick for this is that you can almost back into an MQL in some ways by looking at down funnel conversion. And one of the things you want to keep in mind is that MQL should be source agnostic, which means it doesn't matter if it's paid or if it's organic or what kind of marketing campaign it came from, once we say it's an MQL, it should convert like other MQLs. So if you are wondering what's up with your MQLs and it seems like there's a lot of variance in quality, look at conversion rates by sources, and that may tell you that you want to kind of readjust your MQL definition. Have you guys had any experience with that either?
No, exactly. I always want to say, hey, we know direct traffic converts the highest, so I always want to be like, make 100% of direct traffic MQLs. But if they don't have the firmographics and the marketing interactions that we want, then it really isn't, and it converts just as high as maybe somebody who downloads a piece of content. And so having the firmographic as well as the marketing interactions nailed, I think will provide everybody with a very, at least, good baseline from where to start.
100% agree. All right, so I'm talking about the next one here. This is so now we're talking about, we spent some time talking about looking at your funnel as a whole, and now Jake, great breakdown of the top of the funnel and how to kind of pace for that and make sure you're on track for it. So now let's talk about like the pipeline part of it. And so we do this this exercise called revenue forecast. And for all the sales leaders out there, or salespeople, then you know that revenue forecast is typically one of those things that's self-reported by the AE. And unfortunately, a lot of times that boils down to sentiment, where you had a good conversation and you really jam with the prospect and you're like, oh yeah, they're totally going to buy. And then other people, maybe it's kind of a chillier call and like, I don't know, it's 50-50, but it's more art than science, I think, for how I've certainly done in other organizations and how I've seen it done in the past. So I'm going to give you an equation here to make this more science than art when it comes to forecasting your revenue. So the first part of this equation is familiar to what we saw in the very first slide on the revenue calculation, but it's ops times win rate times average deal size. Then you're going to chart that by your sales cycle distribution, which means that you may say, over all the opportunities I got this month, 20% of them close in 2 weeks, 50% of them close in 3 weeks, 20% of them close in 4 weeks, and 5% close in 5 weeks. So you create this kind of expected revenue curve. And then you take your ops created by cohort, say by week by week by week by week, and then chart when you expect the revenue to come in from that. And you're going to get a more smooth, predictable, and data-driven way of looking at when is revenue going to materialize for this business. And then there's two really important things that you can then do when you have this more accurate forward look at not just what revenue are we going to bring in, but what is the timing of that revenue, because it may not align with your reporting periods, monthly or quarterly. So if I had kind of a down week, if maybe there was like a holiday, or I had a bunch of reps who for whatever reason weren't on the floor for a period of time for sickness or vacations or what have you, then you would expect a dip in ops created for that week or that month. And then you can see exactly how that impact is going to play out, 4 or 5 weeks down the road in terms of when the money's going to come in. So if you're not comfortable with what that curve looks like, or if it doesn't align with what your goals are, then you can know today that you need to be generating more opportunities and exactly how many more to get you on track. So it's a forward-looking way of figuring out whether you're going to hit or not. And then another thing that this does is allows you to analyze like what the reps are self-reporting versus what their statistics say they're actually going to bring in. And I've worked at organizations, and we've done this some here, where we've actually bonused managers and reps on forecast accuracy and not just hitting the number. Because that kind of you always kind of, you probably have some experience with this, Jake, of wanting to pull your hair out with the people that kind of blow their number out one quarter and then miss the next and blow it out. We call that porpoising, right? And so this is a way of kind of figuring out what's going on with that person and holding them accountable to accuracy when it comes to predicting what's going on.
Yeah, all the time. We see that every time. There's two types of reps in our organization. Ones that way undershoot it, and ones so they have a low threshold to cross, versus the ones that are the most optimistic people in the world. And yeah, I get totally what you're saying there.
Yeah, I think it's super important. I remember I famously was at a sales conference once where this guy kept doing that, and he would, every time it's like, oh man, I don't think I'm going to make it. Don't think I'm going to make it. And then, the last 3 days of the month, they'd pull it out like every single time, and he got to the point where he was like expecting like high fives and hugs, and the sales manager broke them down and was like, you know what? I don't think you're good. I think you're getting lucky, and I don't think you know what's going on in your business and in your territory. And it was like, oh, pretty sobering. You know what I mean? Because God, it's hard as hell to manage those people. It's hard to manage the business, or you don't want someone raising the alarms and you think like, oh man, this person's gonna miss. I better focus on that when they're really just kind of playing with the numbers to lower expectations, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I look back and it's kind of funny. When we were growing our team, we had 5 reps, and the way that we would do this at the start is we would go around the room and say, hey, what's the number that you're going to commit to, and what's the number that you're going to go home, or what's the number you're going to commit to, like you can tell your wife this will be on my paycheck, and then what's your stretch goal. And it was 100% off of gut. And one of the things that we struggled with was we just had a short sales cycle. It was 10 to 15 days, and so the pipeline was something that we kind of threw out the window and we just went off of our gut. But the way that you track it here with weekly ops created, it seems like it can work with anyone with any deal size, and it becomes scientific and not so much off of the rep's gut. And as we've just shared, that it never seems to be that right.
Yeah, 100%. And another I'll share one more bonus for all the businesses out there that offer kind of a free trial product. I've done this analysis we do that here, and we do it at my last company. And we looked at the timing of purchase relative to trial expiration. And the instinct as a manager is like, create urgency and, get them to like one call close and shorten the sales cycle and stuff like that. I will say, in doing this analysis across a couple trial businesses, what we found is in both cases, over half of the purchases happen after the trial expires. And so you might find yourself kind of swimming upstream, to create that urgency and get people to forego the economic value of the remainder of their free trial. And you might be better off simply, driving user adoption and then, being there just in time when they go to log in on day 15 or day 31 and they can't access the account and they pay then, right? So pretty interesting analysis there too for trial products.
Yeah, that's good for us where we're just dabbling in that now. So that's exciting and good to hear. Is something to measure and to look at. Is not so the deal length might not matter as much as getting them to a value that they're willing to purchase. Love that.
Yeah, 100%. And Jake, I know you guys are really good on your end about your how you ramp your reps and like paying good attention to how long it takes them to become productive and get into a role. Can you tell us more about how you guys do that at Grow?
Yeah, so would love to, and I appreciate you saying we're really good. I think we're trying to be good. I think what we're trying to understand is first of all, how long does it take on a very basic level? How long does it take a rep to get there, to reach their full productivity? So when I was first working on building this sales team at Grow, I took every sales leader that I was connected with that would give me a lunchtime. I would take them to lunch and I would ask them all one of the same questions. And what I would ask them is, hey, if you could do it all over again, what would you do different if you were at my stage? And without fail, one of their top 2 answers would always be, I wish I would have focused more on training enablement sooner. It's really hard for us to see that as a young, fast-growing business when all you really need is revenue. It's really hard to put the resources there when really you need the cash in other places. But if you truly believe, I think, in the future of your product, then I think it's going to pay dividends. And then on a little bit more of a foundational level, I think what we're trying to understand is from a forecasting perspective. Does it give you do you have the ability to hit those numbers? Not to mention, can you keep the promises that you made to your reps in the interview process? They always want to know, like, hey, how quickly can I get up and can I hit quota? And if you can't keep those promises to them, you've automatically lost trust. And so I love the way that this is calculated here. And I can't take credit for this calculation. This is the CEO of Ideal, but he puts a variable in that I think is super important, which I'll get to, which is the amount of time spent in training. That's standard for everybody, plus the average sales cycle, which is standard, plus X. And this X is based on the salesperson experience. The more that they have, the smaller this number is. Here's an example for a well-seasoned rep. Let's say that the average ramping period is 60 days, and so the rep's a little bit more well-seasoned, and so you're 3 weeks for training, then your average sales cycle is 20 days, and then you have a 45-day ramp for the sales rep. You're saying, hey, I believe that they can ramp a couple of weeks sooner than somebody that doesn't have as much experience. Yeah, and it's worked well for us. I think one of the things that we've struggled with and companies struggle with is just understanding how effective new hires can be. And Kyle, I'm excited to hear your thoughts on this because I know you have a lot of experience with the training, but calculating that normal way, where you have training plus the set a certain amount of time, it never really pays off. You never really understand if the investment that you've made in a senior rep is paying off. And I think I've learned this over the past 8 years, that not all of them are created equal. You largely have the top 25% of your sales reps that are producing more than 40 or 50% of your revenue. So you always have to look for a rep that's going to be represented in that top quartile. But reps, I mean, Kyle, I think you do a lot of interviewing. They're good at selling, right? Which means they're good at interviewing. So it's hard to know. And I like to ask them the one question, hey, if you have enough expertise and experience to command this type of salary, would you be willing to speed up your ramp time or to increase your quota? Do you guys ask anything like that to judge where a rep should be at?
I will now. That's gold. I appreciate that. No, I've never thought about that, but we have 40 reps here, and I've been fortunate to work with a lot of them, either on the hiring and almost certainly on the ramping and the onboarding. And what you're talking about, I agree, Jake. This is a huge thing that you got to figure out as a sales organization, and there's two parts of it. So this is a fantastic equation for like how long should our ramp be, and that's a question that I see posed on a lot of sales leadership message boards. It's one that we have played with internally at every company I've ever worked with. And figuring out what your ramp time should be is the first thing you got to do. And you've got a great experience here. I love the X factor of sales rep experience. I know we have people on our team who we've both promoted from internal SDR roles or BDR roles, and then folks that we've hired externally, and those are very different ramp expectations, and you should know that and expect it and adjust for that when you're planning your revenue and when they're going to be contributing. 100% agree with the way you're looking at that. That's fantastic.
Yeah. And I would also okay, yeah. No, please.
Yeah, so I'd also think that the other challenge with this is figuring out, and I don't care where, I've never been anywhere where we've been able to get the ramp faster than say 6 months. Maybe 5 is kind of the best we've been able to pull off, like credibly. Like some people certainly do ramp faster than that, but as like an expectation, 5 is usually where we're at right now with our group. But I would love to live in a world where we all make perfect hiring decisions every single time, but I think we all know that that's not going to be realistic. So how do you know earlier if you've unfortunately made a bad hire, and how do you like not spend 6 or 9 months and all of those leads on somebody that ultimately is not going to work out? So one of the things that we look at is also scoring their interviews and being very clear on the hiring side, like what traits are we assessing for, and we give everybody on the sales side a numeric score on how they did on those traits, and then we store that and track it, and then we start comparing how they're doing in ramp and evaluate that to say like, man, we've been looking for people that have all kinds of sales experience, and that's something we're weighting heavily, but we've had people that have experience that didn't work out, people who didn't have as much that were fantastic, so maybe we should be evaluating different things. And so we try to use ramp performance to inform our hiring process and making sure we're asking the right questions and bringing in the right profile person as well.
Yeah, I love that. The top of our sales team, you try to profile them by like past experience or charisma in the interview or whatever it is. But our top sales group is a mix of guys who have been selling for years, that have been through every sales methodology training out there. We have former financial analysts, we have college sports coaches, professional athletes, guys that are fresh out of university, and profiling those guys and figuring out who's going to be the best for your team is really hard. I think that one thing, when I was talking to that same group of sales leaders, one thing that they all said that they were really good at was hiring. And I think the secret is, and you kind of said it even there, is like I think we miss a lot more than we would like to admit. And so our philosophy with that is hey, hire the best that we can, and then train like crazy to make sure that reps have every chance of success, and then measure that success, and their continuing of being an employee is based off of that measurement. I know you just mentioned that you guys score numerically, and that's, I think, something that we need to adopt here, is there needs to be traits that are specific to those reps that they share, no matter their background, that have a numerical value that you can tie to. If like you said, 6 months is a good benchmark for a ramp period. We try to do it in 5 months, and we noticed that we were consistently missing that 5 month mark, and so we said to ourselves, hey, did we set the bar too high? was our lead velocity rate too low? We weren't giving them enough leads to be successful. And it ultimately came down to us is we didn't have the systems and training processes in line that allowed us to be successful. We had those first few reps that I call them trailblazers, right? They just kind of go figure it out.
Yeah.
And we were like, hey, I hope these guys are mimicable enough that, and I don't even know if that's a word, to follow, and that everybody else just kind of catches what they're doing and they train themselves. That doesn't work, not always, not forever anyways. It might work at the beginning, but not forever. And how have you guys developed your training program to make this a little bit better? If you can share with us any words of wisdom there.
Hey, sorry, Jake, I think we broke out. Are you back with us?
Oh, yep. Can you hear me?
Yeah, for sure. Sorry about that. Yep.
Okay.
All right.
No,
Cool.
no worries. Oh, I was probably going down too far down that one anyway. So I'll jump into our next one, which.
Oh man, you were spitting fire. I thought you just melted the phone. Happens. Yes, but let's move on. What do you got? Let's talk about revenue by lead channel.
Yeah. So this one has probably been the most transformational metric for me as a sales leader. It helps me understand how I'm doing personally, how the marketing team's doing, how effective our trainings are, and where to allocate resources. So I want to say that you can start this one out basic. You're going to see a formula on there, but you can just start out with revenue generated divided by numbers of leads, and that will give you a revenue per lead. It can be as simple as that. But for this one, we like to add a component of retention to it. And it gives us a bigger, more encompassing grasp on it. Why we add retention is we really want to know if they're good long-term customers. So what I mean by that is we want them to provide good shareholder value. And I'm not talking about value to a board of investors or to the CEO who owns most of the company. I'm talking about to the employees, so it can be a good long-term place that's going to provide growth and advancements of economic opportunity, as well as advancements in your career for people. And you can really only do that by bringing on the best customers and spending your money in the most wisest in the wisest places. So this, like I said, this is the one that I own as the VP of sales. And I know that I have a few levers. Hey, if this isn't going the way that I want, I know I have a few levers that I can use to increase that number. I can say, hey, let's increase our average deal size. Let's work on closing bigger and better deals. Let's work on increasing our close rate. And if I can help my team do that, I know that we're going to move in the right direction. And if not, hey, we're back to blaming marketing and giving us too bad of leads. But I am kidding, but just another plug for making sure that you get your leads, the SQLs and the MQLs, the sales qualified lead and the marketing qualified leads, nailed. The best benchmark that I can probably give on this one, if someone's looking for, hey, what should that be? It really depends. And so that's a bad answer, but I would say get it and track it. And this can be a floating benchmark inside of your company. Focus on it and improve it. And that's really where you're going to see the most. Just to give you guys an idea, our channels, they range anywhere from $2 to $10 of a revenue per lead. And this can be much, much higher if you have a large deal size. One other thing I want to talk about this was just variations of this metric. I think the most important decision that we make on this is revenue per lead by sales rep. And what this helps us understand is which sales reps are closing which leads more effectively. And I agree with you 100%, Kyle, that they should be agnostic if they're a marketing qualified lead, but we've seen some difference in which reps somehow work better with different channels. One rep will be phenomenal at closing deals from a trade show. Maybe they're better in person that way. And one rep will be phenomenal from closing a demo request that comes in through a Facebook lead form. And understanding that and allocating those leads to your sales team helps you to be the most efficient sales team possible. So our reps know this. They know, hey, I have this score on this lead, and versus the guy sitting next to me that has that score, and he's going to get a few more of those leads. So it's, as a sales leader, I don't get questions. Why is he getting more leads, or why is she getting all the trade show leads? It is totally done on science for us, and it's given us a really, really good insight there. Do you all look at this metric at all, Kyle?
Yeah, we definitely look at like revenue per lead for sure. And I love the idea of adding a retention component to that. I know like we've looked at this before and found that, certain sources like, like for example, like organic leads are great. We love when people like search for us by name. and you tend to get kind of a broader variance over like what those leads look like in terms of size or ideal customer fit and so forth. And then if you look at your channels, not just by the volume of leads or even how they convert, but also how well they stay, that's very valuable, right? Because you might get some people that, you know, sign up a lot, particularly on maybe lower seat sizes or lower deal sizes, but then churn out, you know. And if you don't reach, you know, if you're not the type of business that necessarily gets paid up front, you have more of a subscription model or a recurring revenue model, then if these guys don't stay with you for you to get your payback on them, or ideally 3 times your payback on them, you know, then your whole business is running on a hamster wheel and it's exhausting and you're not getting anywhere, right?
Yeah.
So that's a really, really important way of looking at the business. And especially if you're starting out or in growth phase, you know, this is going to speak to your ability to start placing bets with your own money, you know, and it supports lowering your cash burn rate. It is a very, very important health metric. And yeah, we've definitely looked at this. But yeah, it's really good
We
stuff.
again, I think for people who are just starting out there that are listening, is maybe you only have to run this analysis once a quarter. If you don't have a system that allows you to track it on a minute by minute or week by week basis, and it takes some math to get there, especially if you're doing it by rep and by channel, but do it on a quarterly basis. Change allocation, change your spend, change where you're focusing your marketing money, and make those decisions that are going to improve your business. And I think that's where you're going to get the real bang for your buck here. And again, it's my metric. I love it. But you know what I'm really excited for is actually our last one, where we're going to take a step back and we're going to kind of understand. And this is one that we don't do at Grow, but as Kyle and I have talked, I've become a huge fan of, and understanding our systems and our processes. And I'm excited to just hear a little bit more about this, or hear it again, because every time you tell me about it, I learn more. So I'm excited.
Yeah, for sure. You know, this is the golden motions analysis, and it's a great example of how baseball statistics are in some ways 5 years ahead of the business world. This is very much a concept that was made popular by Michael Lewis's book Moneyball, and the idea was that the Oakland A's were able to, well, at the time, you know, everybody looked at your counting stats, if you will, in baseball, like what your batting average was, how many runs did you score, how many home runs did you hit, how many runs did you knock in. And people were paid according to what those statistics look like. Well, they took a step back and challenged those assumptions. It says, wait a minute, is batting average, is home runs, is runs, are those even the things that directly contribute to winning, right? And are we paying people to do the right things? And they figured out that, you know, on base percentage and like getting on base was far more predictive of a team's ability to score runs, even in some cases, than hitting home runs. And that there was a whole raft of players out there that were really good at that, that nobody was paying attention to and could be employed relatively inexpensively. And that's what Billy Beane went out and did, and led the A's to a second round playoff exit to my beloved Red Sox that year. Anyway, so the idea is to apply that same methodology to the business. And you know, I'm not gonna geek out too much on the formula. There's tons of tools out there that can do it. It's called a correlation analysis, and the concept is that you look at a theory, which is, you know, in my business, that, like, let's say we think doing a demo is going to be highly predictive of somebody buying, or we think that when they add more users, or if they download this piece of content, you know, you can have a variety of different theories relative to sales, to marketing, or to product usage that you think are going to predict either retention or purchase. And then you simply chart those in a graph, as you have demonstrated here by cohort. So we look at a group here of, like, you know, maybe we think that if our customers add more users, we think that's going to buy. And as you can see, there's kind of a correlation, kind of not. And what you're going to get when you chart this is kind of a range of outcomes that you see below, where it's either like a one-to-one relationship, or it's like highly correlative, or kind of indicative of behavior, or it actually, like, if they do this, they almost always cancel, or if they do this, they almost never buy, right? And so when you do this analysis, you know, you're going to be kind of smacked in the face with some realities of the business. And for us, when we've done this here, I mean, this employs or informs how we like what kind of product tutorials do we give, like how do we coach trial users on like what to do next in the app. And we've been shocked, and many times it's like the thing that we think is the thing that makes the most sense to do is completely unintuitive, or not the thing that the customer wants to do that's gonna help them purchase the product. But I mean, you're a baseball fan, Jake. So like, how would you guys potentially use this at Grow?
Yeah, I mean, so interestingly enough, side note, I almost wore my Red Sox hat just for luck for you today, but I didn't put it on today. I should have. So it was interesting. I had one of our business intelligence engineers run over to me like a month ago, and he said, "Hey, Jake, I want to run a statistical inference by regression analysis on behaviors before people purchase." And I'm like, "All right, man, you do that, and then explain to me what it is, because I don't really understand the words." And so he went and he did that, and and he found, excuse me, that that customers that in their free trial, if they just connected 4 or more data sources to our platform, they were twice as likely to buy as somebody that only had connected 2. And like so that became like our goal and our foundation of our free trials, to get people connected. And it's not so much a selling technique as it's what's best for the customer. They are actually getting the value at that specific point that they're willing to pay the money for, and they cross that value cash threshold that we all want them to get across all the time, and they do it on their own. And this was hugely important to us, and I think we should be doing it more, and doing it in the way that you've recommended here, because he was the only one that could do it not at our whole company, but the only one that had the idea to do it, and gave us such great insights of where we should be focusing our time and our energy. Because hey, if you're spending time in an area that's not going to produce the correct outcomes or the correct value for your customers, and I mean, like, what are we doing at that point? We've got to change. Who cares if they can hit 50 home runs in a year if they strike out 350 times? I don't even know if that's a good ratio, but just throwing out some numbers there.
No, that sounds like a lot of whiffing for sure. Yeah, no, and I agree, and that's a great application, and that's like the technical jargon. That's exactly what this guy was talking about, right? That's what it's called, is like a regression analysis, and I definitely had to Google that prior to this to understand the mechanics of that. But luckily, there's great tools like Google Sheets and others, right, that'll help you quickly calculate this stuff. But yeah, we did this in our business, and we found that we have a free trial product, and people can go in and upgrade anytime. But what we found is that of the new business that comes in for us, 78% of it does have a demo attached to it, that they talk to one of our salespeople. And so we try to look at like SDR or BDR kind of activities that like sending emails or certain sequences, or how many times they call, and on which days did they call, and like what was most effective. And what we found was that if people didn't, like, we have a 14-day free trial, but if people didn't schedule a demo within the first 5, they don't really do it at all. And so that really changed what we asked our BDR team to do. Because it's like, if it's day 6, 7, 8 and we're not getting anywhere with anybody, you have really diminishing returns. It almost doesn't make sense to keep hounding folks and asking if they want to see a demo. Like, maybe we can change courses and start doing more, more kind of campaigns or emails or marketing nurturing material, rather than treat them as if they're in a sales cycle. So really change the way we look to people, even if they are in an active trial. Really fascinating stuff. I'll share one more analysis that we did on this at a previous company. But in the retention context, we had this theory that depth of usage was going to be more indicative of retention, and we tested that, and we found that to be true. There was a low positive correlation with many of our more sophisticated features, and if customers use those, then they were more likely to renew when their annual contract came up. But then we did that analysis against like what our customer success team does, and they were doing these quarterly business reviews and this proactive outreach, to talk strategy and account growth with our accounts. And if somebody did a quarterly business review with our CS team, they were twice as likely to stay on board than if they used our stickiest and most advanced features. So that kind of pointed us in the right direction. Like, man, we should really be investing in making sure we're helping our customers with this one-on-one touch to be successful, because it's actually more predictive of renewal than even depth of product usage in some cases. So that helped us really make smart decisions around how we allocate our personnel.
Do you think that running these, what's the frequency that you run them? Do they change ever? Have you ever seen something that was a positive correlation then become meaningless later on, or does it usually stick for the life of the business?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't change wildly in what we found. I think we did this analysis quarterly, and we would tend to do it like usually the first time you do it, it's going to reveal like so much stuff for you to work on and focus on that you won't have time to do it again. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? For another 6 months, like, nor do you need to. This has a way of kind of like revealing statistically, what people want, or how they want to engage with you, both with your product and with your personnel. And so, armed with that, kind of new information around, your enterprise, you'll have a handful of things you can go out and start executing on right away. And usually they're pretty meaty. It informs your sales cycle. It informs your first user experience in your application. So I don't think you need to go crazy with updating this, because it is somewhat sophisticated analysis. But I would say biannually it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I think I know how I'm getting good content from you, Kyle, and sharing that is like I'm writing down things and I'm like, all right, let me just run out of here and start going to work on those things rather than
Totally.
than finish. But that would be really rude as a host. But I'm excited to go figure this out. So
Totally, Jack. We're definitely gonna apply some of this stuff. I mean, you've definitely put me on game in this webinar. That like I'm still looking at the retention slide on leads, and I'm just, wheels are already turning on that. But I can tell the wheels are also turning with a lot of our customers right now. We've got a ton of questions that have come in, and we got about 10 minutes left here. So what do you think, Jake? Should we turn it over and start getting some questions from the folks? All right.
All right, so this is Kira again. I'll jump back in here. So just for everybody on the line, you will be getting an email with the recording of this webinar. So do not fear. All of this information you will have at your disposal to share with your team. So don't worry, you'll be getting a copy of this, and you'll be getting that tomorrow morning. So here's a little recap of all of the kind of key questions that Kyle and Jake answered. And we're just going to dive into some of the live questions that you guys have been asking, which are super great questions. So we'll just start with number one. Jake and Kyle, how do you guys know when you should hire more reps?
Man, Jake, you dominate this one. Why don't you start this one? I'll add my 2 cents on that. Yeah.
I think that we created a revenue model early on that was based solely upon reps quota, just being like, hey, if I want to add an additional 100,000 of revenue every month, I need to add 2 reps to it. But I think that one of the most impactful ones that we realized is that, hey, if 80% of your reps aren't hitting your quota, then it's not time to add. You need to work on other things inside of your business. That's our baseline. We need, and we set quotas that are tough but achievable. And I know some other companies set quotas that are tough and highly unachievable. And so that wouldn't be a good measure for you. But for us, it's like, hey, this is one that we feel confident that our reps can hit on a month in and month out. And if 80% of reps are hitting it, then we know that we have capacity to hire more reps. And we also have the leads to support those reps.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think what underpins the answer to this question is making sure you have your quotas right, and making sure you have the leads to support that. So generally when you're starting your business, you put 1 or 2 people in the pit, and just they're just trying to prove it out, and so they're busting as hard as they can, and they're generating a certain number of sales, and then that gives you your first. So basically, you have to run the business and your sales motion over a couple periods to kind of like figure out the revenue equation that we talked about previously. And then you can break that down by person. And so if you feel like you're in a good grip, like Jake, to your point, if you have like, 70 to 80% of your team hitting quota, then your quota is probably right. And so then hiring is a matter of saying like, okay, if I hire someone today, they're going to be hitting quota in 5 or 6 months time. And then looking at what your annual goals are and making sure that you have enough quota carrying reps to where if you add up them hitting quota, like your team attainment is on average 105%. If they hit 100%, that needs to add up to what your business goals are. And then hiring an additional person above that, to make sure that, if you get some unexpected attrition for whatever reason, that, you know, you don't want to put yourself in a position, you want like a 15% buffer usually. So you don't want to be in a position where if like one person, quits or is termed or has to take a leave for whatever reason, that just completely makes it impossible for your team to hit the number.
Yeah, we see that here, when somebody leaves and we're just like, hey, sorry, your team now has to absorb their quota. That's like the message I want to send to them. It's just not the right one, but it's, and having that 15% buffer, I think is ideal.
I completely agree.
Yeah, so this is a good segue into another question, which is, somebody asked really specifically, let's say, I want to achieve $100,000 in 1 year. How do they calculate how many leads they should try to generate per month? How would you approach that kind of equation?
Yeah. So, all right. So let me back into the math here, right? So if I want to achieve $100,000 in 1 year, I would first divide that by my average deal size, and that'll give me the number of wins that I need, right? I then would divide that by my win rate, which should tell me the amount of qualified opportunities I need to have. And then I can take my lead opportunity number to figure out how many leads I'm going to need, right? So you're basically working the revenue equation backwards to start with the amount of dollars that you need. So instead of multiplying those conversion rates, you're going to be dividing them by the previous one, if that makes sense.
And how do you calculate average deal size? How do you know what that is?
Well, so you have to have a CRM, obviously, right? You need to have like a tool to be tracking all that, right? But you look at, kind of what would be standard either with ProsperWorks or any CRM that you look at would be being able to track like the close dates on every deal, the amount of revenue attached to that, which you would call like your revenue at acquisition or whatever, and then being able to kind of go backwards from there.
Yeah, and I think one thing to add to that is depending on your business model, right? If you have a recurring business model or if you have a standard business model, we always measure the average deal size off of the first year ACV. And I know some other companies will want to say, hey, this is what the deal was worth because they signed a 3-year deal with us and we're going to provide services for 3 years. And so that does contribute to your revenue, right? But it doesn't contribute to it if you're breaking it down in when you are actualizing that revenue. And so we have a mix of a service component as well as a software component, and both of those things add up to revenue. So sometimes we've done math where we've stripped out the services component. We said, hey, this is just the software piece, and this is what I'm selling, and that's what I'm going to count as, we call it our monthly recurring revenue. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with that, but in addition to that, we do add our services for the first year because it does that. So there's a few ways to go around it, but I typically recommend calculating it for the first year revenue that you're going to get, and not just the total bookings of a contract if you're doing multiple year deals.
No, you're absolutely right. That's a great way to think about it. And you mentioned service as well. Another thing to think about too is that if you have more than one product or any opportunities for expansion, that's a great way to lower the stress on new business acquisition. So if you want to have $1,000 in revenue in year one, you can think about like, how can I gain $1,000 in new business MRR, or how do I take the people that signed up in the first, second, third, and fourth month and have them grow their business month over time? And the less pressure you put on sales and marketing, generally the healthier your financials will be over time.
Gotcha. Yeah, I love that. Exactly right.
Awesome. Okay, moving on, cutting you two off.
All right.
You're amazing, but we're moving on to the next question because we've got a lot in here. So one person asked, how do you manage the sales team and making sure they're capturing information correctly? This person, and I quote, suffers with rubbish in and rubbish out, and the staff not capturing the info correctly. And I think every single person in the business world has dealt with that. So how do you manage that? What's your advice?
So I'll kind of take this at the start, where I think for us it was just simplifying it. Hey, what are the very, very basic things that we need, and starting from there and coming in your CRM, making those required. Now, if you don't have a CRM, that's going to be a little bit tougher, and maybe you can. One thing on that piece of advice, if we're not going to look at systems here, and you're just doing this as a very new business, then just make it part of the compensation piece. If a rep's compensated on data quality and that's a big issue for you, adding that there. But besides that, we've just made very, very basic things required. Like you cannot move past a lead to an opportunity inside of Grow without very specific information on that deal to get you to that, to get us the data. You have to have the number of employees, you have to have the website, you have to have their use case, you have to have like a primary quarterback that's going to be implementing the deal. You have to have those things, and that data has to be there, otherwise it can't proceed. And if that deal gets closed without it, if somebody puts in fake information, we do not pay on it until the rep goes back and alters that information. I know that's kind of hardcore sometimes, but we had to be that way just to get everybody in the rhythm of doing it. And once they're in the rhythm of doing it, then we see that it just becomes natural, and they kind of get the value of it.
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, I would even add that, like, I think simplifying is absolutely one of the most important things here. I've made this mistake early in my sales management career of, you know, I would call it like over engineering solutions to problems I don't know I'm going to have. And that's in like mandating that people fill out all kinds of information in the CRM, because like, what if I need this 6 months from now, or what if I want to know this then, or whatever. And so I think the most important thing is, like, if you're going to ask a salesperson or anybody in the organization to enter data in the CRM, make sure that you really need it. You know, that having it is going to be used regularly to drive a tangible business outcome that you can then communicate, and it's clear as day to everybody that needs to enter the information in. So they need to understand how, you know, providing this data will help them sell more, be more effective. And that's the first thing. And then I think the second thing is just generally focusing on tools that are simple and easy to use. You know, like we kind of talked about this at the beginning, but I think the shift of the market today, not just with ProsperWorks, but with tools like, you know, Zendesk or Slack or a variety of others that have kind of made complex business processes very simple, is that, you know, it's got to be stupid simple, you know what I mean, for people to want to do it, and then just automate wherever you can beyond that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome.
Agreed.
Okay, guys, we can probably hit one more. So here's an interesting question. So if I have, hypothetically, if I have a strong correlation between leads generated and ops generated, but a weak correlation between ops generated and won deals, am I right to assume that I have bad SQL standards, or I have insufficient account executives? Who do you blame it on?
That's a gem of a question. Jake, you want to take a stab at it first?
Oh man, I don't even know where to start on that one, because that's I honestly, my gut response is it's probably a mix of both. But the one thing that I've learned as a sales leader is getting and it's probably a question that I would love to ask back, is like, did they used to have success in opportunities to close won deals? If they've never had success in that, if that correlation's never been strong, then it's most likely a wrong definition. If there was success and there's been like a degeneration in that correlation, then it's most likely an issue with the people who are selling the product, or the people who are, or something's changed in the market, and it's hard to know what that is without being inside of the business. But I would say that then, and if you have never had success, I would change the definition of an opportunity and figure out what that is, and maybe you need to take something a step further before you call it an opportunity. And then going forward, I like to hire reps in pairs for this reason alone, is if something's changed, you have two people to measure it against. It's not just one person failing and being like, hey, like this isn't going the way I wanted. But like if you have two people, they push each other, and if one rises to the top, then you know it's not really a process problem, it's a personnel problem.
Yeah, no, great question. I agree that you kind of want more on that, right? So usually when I'm looking at a problem, I ask myself, it's either the people, the process, or the leadership, right? And so in this case, if you have a BDR team that is converting leads to ops, but then you have a sales team that isn't closing them, is it the sales people? Is it the sales leadership? Or is it our sales process? And so, you know, maybe it's, you know, you'd want to cut that again, like by looking at performance by rep. Like, are some reps like consistently closing at a high rate? If so, then, you know, it's either a leadership or person problem. If nobody is really getting it done, or if everybody is getting it done with a lot of variance where they do well one month or not the next, that it's probably your process. And when I think about that, you know, my gut instinct is that you'd want to narrow your definition of an ideal customer profile. So you may have leads that are becoming ops, but then ops that, you know, just don't close, because you're maybe trying to go too broad with who you're selling to.
Awesome. Okay, guys, we're right on the top of the hour here. You guys have been amazing. This is so fun listening to you guys just hit it back and forth. Both brilliant.
It's been fun for us too.
Yeah, real pleasure.
People on the line, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. I know there's lots of questions that you guys may still have. Feel free to email Kyle and Jake. Here's their information. Happy to start a conversation with you guys. Hopefully we'll be having a lot more of these webinars. We've been getting a lot of positive comments along the way. So awesome. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.